Anyway, I'll try to get started real quick. In here, who has IEPs for their kiddos?
Not yet.
Does anybody have a 504?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to kind of go through. Let me know if I'm going too fast, because this is a lot to cover, but we will have time, later, maybe at the end of the day, for questions. The first part, we talk about IDEA. That's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that's what governs all of your kids in special education from birth to 21. Okay. There's also a question now about, people are always asking, well, do they not get to go to school when they're 21? When do they go? When do you transition out? Briefly, the way that's supposed to work is you're supposed to start with a transition plan when your kiddos are 13, 14, and by the time they get to be seniors, they're going to make a decision. You guys are going to make a decision. This committee that decides, hey, is staying in school the most appropriate setting for this child, or is going out to a work center, going out somewhere else, going out doing something else? What is the most appropriate placement? Used to be kiddos just stayed till they were 21, and then they left. Not anymore. If it's not appropriate, if they're not learning anything, if they're not getting anything, if that's not the best setting for them, then they're going to dismiss them. And a lot of parents don't understand why that's happening. And a lot of our, like Arkansas Children's and a lot of places will say, oh, you can stay, and they don't understand that all of that's changed. We did find out that it's kind of like being 5 to go to kindergarten. If you are going to turn 21, it's not 21 and out like it used to be. You get to finish that whole entire school year. So that's just a little quick thing on there. The biggest thing, Section 504, is your Rehabilitation Act. That one is more about discrimination. Okay, that one was brought about when we first started getting ramps everywhere and access. It was all about access and discrimination. It is not what people might term as the lesser special ed. So if you don't get special ed, you get a 504. They are for two completely different reasons, and that's part of what I'm going to kind of explain to you here. IEPs do end at 21 or 22 or whenever your child leaves school. 504s can continue into college. So those can follow you. You can't have, there's no reason to have both. If it's a well-written plan, there's no reason to have both. Now, I do know people that do both, but that seems really redundant, because anything you can put on a 504, you can put on an IEP. And, as I'll get to later, anything you could qualify for in special ed, you can get on a 504, even it's speech therapy, OT, any of that kind of stuff. The key is that it's not funded, because this is a federal thing and there's not money for that, so schools are like, they can't get speech services, they can't get OT services. You look at it, and there's a resource guide on your in your resources. That's not the way it is. So they're going to do everything they can to make sure they qualify for special ed, because that's where they're going to get funding for it. But they can't deny a child services that needs it, and you have the data to support it, because they don't have the funding. And they'll say it all the time. And I always say, people will say a lot of things, they won't write a lot of things. If I can't say anything that you don't believe here, get it in writing. Get it in writing. Get it in writing. Ask for it in writing. Do it in writing. I was in Chicago for a conference, and there was a lady there from Texas who she was she was working for education, and she was very frustrated because she wanted to get an evaluation, wanted to get the kiddo into special ed, because that's where the resources are. No, it's not the way that works. I put the wrong child find slide on here, and I'm sorry. It's the early childhood one. But basically, anybody can make a referral. You don't have to have a diagnosis. You just have to have a suspicion or think that this might be there. Anybody can make a referral. You don't even have to be in public school to get an evaluation. Kids that are homeschooled, kids that are virtual schooled, kids that are private schools still have a right to child find, which means free evaluations from the schools. Okay?
How do you get that?
You ask for it.
Just from the school, or you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You ask for it. You're saying, I want. And again, when you talk about terminology, people come in and they say, I want an IEP, or I want a 504. What you need to be asking for is, I want to have an evaluation. I want my child evaluated to determine if they might need any services. Because the first thing people are going to say is, well, I don't need an IEP. You don't know that. You haven't done any evaluating. You haven't gathered any data. You haven't done anything. So your language is, I want to make a referral to discuss having my child tested. That's really what you're asking for, because that's that first conference, that's that decision. That's what you're doing. At the separate page, and this comes directly from the Department of Ed, there's a referral process form in here, which I printed out for you, because that kind of goes through the timeline. But this is your referral timeline. Because the first thing you're asking for is a referral. You're asking for a referral. Referral needs to be in writing, okay? Don't just call and say, I want one. Most everybody here they don't already have services, but if you might need them, do it in writing. Have your parent do it in writing. Yes, this teacher is the one that's going to fill out the form, but you need to have written an email and says, I want to have my child evaluated. I would like to have my child tested. Because if not, there's no record of that date.
Well, most of our students already enter school with an IEP. That's kind of the impression I'm under when my kid leaves here. That
There's a transition process. It's kind of hard to go. Just kind of talk about what everybody needs to.
You need like 3 different
There's
sessions.
a transition process between birth to 3 to 5, and 3 to 5. There's that transition process. Then there's a whole transition process for preschool into kindergarten. The issue with that is if I don't know if they have IEPs here. Do they have IEPs here?
Nope.
Okay, so that's the issue. If you're in, well, some people do and some people don't. If you're going to the preschool here, you might have it. If you're just getting private therapy, you might not. So you're not going to be part of that transition process. Okay, so what you need to do is contact your school district in the spring and ask for that evaluation.
They're going to be contacting us. I just spoke with the curriculum director here, and
again,
Medicaid changes in July 1st
medication.
and all that. Someone from your school district should be contacting you. That's what she said within the next 6 months. And
That's how it works. That's how it works if you have an
I can
IEP.
tell you it didn't happen last year.
Yeah, if you have an IEP.
This is brand new, as of July 1st.
Okay, and again, private centers, they all do everything different. But the way it is like we have Kids First, we have some of those, and those kids actually have IEPs. I was a transition coordinator. I did early childhood special ed. I went into all of those, and we got that all started. But my kiddos that were out in private therapy, nobody knows about them. Nobody knows about them. So if you're one of those, which is fine, you are the one that's going to have to, because most of the time your center is not going to be doing that. And I don't want to say it's about money, because it's not, but some of them it's like, well, do you want to go here? Do you want to, get free services from the school? That's not usually it, but sometimes it is. But basically it becomes the parent's responsibility to ask for that. I try, in our group, we try to go out and let centers know that we know that are just private therapists, hey, contact your school, and some of your districts that have been doing this a long time, your centers that have been doing this a long time might have an agreement that they come in and do it, but your kiddos that don't have an IEP are not automatically transitioned. So not to get too off of that, but that's just an FYI. The big difference is when you're talking about IDEA, you are talking about special education, you are talking about specialized instruction. So these are kiddos with an identified disability, and it has to be one of these categories. They have to meet certain eligibility criteria, and I have that where you can go click on that. It's on your resource page. They have to meet that criteria that they have a disability. Then there has to be an adverse effect on their education, okay? You'll hear parents say, well, they're refusing an IEP, or they didn't qualify, or they're saying they don't have autism, or they're saying that they don't have this, or they're saying that they don't have this. The words they need to be using is that disability is not adversely affecting their education. Mm-hmm. What people tend to forget is functional performance is also part of that. It's not just academic performance, but there are certain criteria. That's where your 504 comes in. The 504, you still have to have a disability. You don't have to have the same formal type of evaluations. It can just be school-based data. It can be just the suspecting a disability. Those kiddos have a disability that substantially limits a major life activity. This can also be at home. Okay. Your IEP is school. Bus counts if it's on their IEP. Beginning of the school day, end of school day. 504 all the time. And learning is not the only thing, okay? You have a lot of kiddos. I have a kiddo that's gifted. He is the smartest kid in his school, but he has ADHD, pretty severe. He can't take medication when he gets home or he won't sleep. So he can't do his homework. It would take him 5 hours to do his homework, where it would normally take an hour or 2 hours for a typical student. The purpose of 504 is to level the playing field. We're not giving advantages, we're making it fair. So again, they figured out a way. They did shorten his assignments. They did do a lot of different things because it was because of his ADHD. And it was because it was affecting him at home. At school, he was fine. Okay, so that's where information from parents is very, very important. But I've had a lot of 504s get refused because they say their grades are fine. Their tests are fine. And they say the same thing for special ed. That's not the only factor. Okay? That's not the only factor. But that's the big difference between the two of qualifying, is how is your disability affecting you? What areas is it affecting? How is it affecting your child during the day? There's a good image that I stole from the Department of Ed, it's now the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which kind of explains, gives a good visual for the 504 on IEP. You've got all students, then you've got a smaller group of students with disabilities, then you've got students, with disabilities that need some support, and special ed is the smallest group. Okay, it's the smallest group. Really think of it as specialized instruction. Your child needs somebody working with them in order to be successful. Okay? If not, a lot of those needs can be handled on a 504 if it's just modifications. If they don't need to go to a self-contained class, if they don't need to go to a resource room, if they don't need a special ed teacher providing specialized instruction, they don't really need special ed. The goal, again, is to improve. I don't know if you guys know much about RTI. I'm on the RTI committee for parent involvement. Your schools were really trying to work on improving that core instruction because our kiddos need to be out there in the core instruction. That was the big focus of the the Special Ed Leaders Academy this year, was all means all. And our kiddos need to be in the regular classroom and get that regular instruction, and only need to be pulled out for specialized instruction. So again, you might have a kiddo that struggles, has a disability that's behavior really affects them, and I struggle with this at the beginning of the year where everybody's like, we can't handle them in kindergarten, we can't handle them in kindergarten, we can't handle them in kindergarten. If you look on your IEP, you're only supposed to be pulled out of the regular classroom if, with all the supports, all the services they could get, they're not successful. You have to try that first, and a lot of times that doesn't happen.
But that wait and fail approach was like, let's just see
Yeah.
how it goes for a while, and then it.
We don't want to do the wait and fail, and that's why you're asking for an eval.
But still, that can
Not
take
an
60
IEP.
days.
Yes, the timeline, the way that works is, that's just the way the law is you have a maximum of 60 days from the day you sign permission to test. They have 60 days to get them tested. Then from the date of the last evaluation component, they have a maximum of 30 days to have a conference. So that's a maximum of 3 months. That does not mean that the child does not need to get any help in that meantime. Mm-hmm. We've had some where we've written 504s for them. Because again, good schools, they should be providing the supports and instruction that the kiddos need. And that gives you a good amount of time to say, hey, can we make it in the regular classroom? Can we make it? What do we need to modify? But there's nothing that says you can't do a referral for special ed and have a 504 while you're waiting. That's why I hate saying referral for special ed, because it's referral for an eval, okay? But you can already know that the child needs supports, and you can be providing supports in the meantime. It's not like it doesn't need to be where they don't get anything.
So the 504 is way quicker to
Yes.
make than an IEP?
Yes.
Okay.
When we talk about the differences between the two, one of the big differences is notice. Those of you who've done IEPs, they're supposed to give you a reasonable amount of notice, which typically is 14 days. You can waive that notice and have them earlier. But for special ed, you're supposed to get notice. Parents are absolutely included. You're supposed to get a piece of paper that tells you when and where you're going to be meeting and who all's going to be there. For 504, those committees are a group of knowledgeable people, and of which the parent is a recommended participant. Okay? So it's not the same requirement level, and they don't have the same amount of notice. So they could call you up literally on Monday and say, we're going to have a 504 meeting on Thursday. Hope you can be there. So that's and that was something I had to learn coming from special ed to 504. But I try to say good school districts want to work with parents. Good school districts will want to make sure that you're there because they are supposed to, even in 504s, get parent permission to evaluate. But there's nothing written down that says what that's supposed to look like. Whereas in special ed, we have a form, a place that you sign to give permission. There's not, since it's coming from federal and it's not state, there's not a whole lot of consistency there. But Arkansas is working on a template. But you will find if you get into the 504 realm that you could have a completely different looking 504 in the same in different buildings in the same district. So it can be as detailed or as vague as you want it to be, and I call it the little game we play where we try to be as specific as possible and they try to be as vague as possible. The way I work around that is I try to say, look, I'm not trying to catch you doing anything wrong, but we're all human beings and we don't remember things if they're not written down. So, I know if I got finished with a meeting, I'm going to be then putting that file here and moving on to the next meeting, and I might not be able to remember when I come back. I know I'm horrible at that when I'm doing intakes with my families that I'm helping. If I don't have it all written down, then I might not get to input that in to my database for a week, and then I'm like, what did we talk about? What did that note mean? Okay, we're just human beings. And so trying to say, hey, we're not trying to catch you doing anything wrong. We just want this for everybody. And if it's not written down, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen. I don't care how wonderful your teacher is. I don't care what great supports. If they're not written down, they are not happening. Because if they were to go to due process or somebody else were to look at it or I was to look at it, I'd look at it and go, this is a kiddo with autism. You have no sensory supports in here whatsoever. You have no visuals. You have nothing. Because we know it in our brain and we forget to write it down. Okay, so that's a big thing, is trying to make sure it's written down. I talked about consent. Eligibility, again, is pretty much the same. You have to determine there's a disability. There's specific criteria for special ed, not as stringent for 504, okay? But you still have to review that data, look at the data, and say, hey, how is this affecting your child? And then once we figure out how it's affecting them, we kind of talked about this earlier, then you develop your plans. But a lot of people want to go in and start writing a plan and they haven't even determined that there's a disability, or I've looked at a lot of 504s that don't even have the disability on there and what areas it's affecting. If your child has more than one, okay? This was something that's come up. It used to be if you have older kids, you would know that if you just qualified in one little area, like if you just had a speech problem or you just had a written expression problem, that was all you could get. You couldn't get anything else because it all had to relate to that. That is not the case anymore. I say once you basically get the ticket into the amusement park, you can ride all the rides. Okay, that was the terminology that they used. So it's getting eligible is one thing. Services are different. You're supposed to help the child in every area of need they have. So I don't care if they've only got the trouble in math. But if they're struggling in reading, and we've got some data to support that, they can still help them. But some of your smaller districts, some of your ones that don't see this as much, don't really understand that yet. Procedures and protections. You are all supposed to be protected. You're supposed to be notified of your rights. Some places will only go over the rights with you the first time they meet you. Nowadays, it's just a little URL to click on the notice. Notice of action, there's just a little place to click on it. They don't always hand you the books. A lot of us are real old school and we want to hand you the book and we want to give it to you and you can have it. But they have to get that a minimum of once a year. 504s, they're not as good at providing the procedural safeguards because you're supposed to have a right to appeal, you're supposed to have a right to disagree. Finding that in writing is harder for them, but they're supposed to provide that as well. But it does say, one thing is district personnel, they have a duty to refer if they have a suspicion. And that gets us in our whole wait and see area. There's a duty, it's written in there that they have an obligation to refer kids that they suspect as having a disability. Does that mean that we can't try interventions? No, but you've got to get to that referral conference first. And you can get in that referral conference and say, hey, look, we don't think we need to evaluate yet because we're going to do this and this and this and this and this. But getting that in writing is important because a lot of times you don't ever get that far. You never have that referral conference. And they just tell you, we're going to do this and this and this first. Well, fine, let's have a meeting. and let's get down and let's get it in writing that we requested an evaluation and you said my child doesn't need one because we're gonna do this and this and this. I would just like it documented. You know, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but a lot of times we do so much verbal that then things don't get followed like they should, which is upsetting because they should. Stay put is an important thing. It usually affects people, your kiddos that are having your discipline problems or if they're having a big disagreement with your districts over services. This can work for you and against you. Basically, if you're having a disagreement and you're going to file a complaint or file a due process because the school wants to change something that you don't want changed. I've had it where they wanted to reduce a kiddo's day. And the parent was like, nope, we're not doing that. We need more data. And they're like, well, we're going to do it anyway. You can exercise what's called your stay put rights, which means I want them to stay put, that IEP to be exactly the same as it is until this, but then you have to follow up with filing a complaint or filing for due process or something, but that child nothing can be changed until that is all resolved, okay? 504 doesn't have that, okay? So, not a bad thing, they just don't have it. So if you guys had a disagreement and they say your child doesn't need a 504, they can just stop providing services. And they'll just stop providing services until you guys can go back and have other meetings, but in the meantime, your child's not getting anything. The way this can work against you sometimes is if you're trying to get your kiddo out of a situation. We had a kiddo we were trying to get out of ALE, and we did the whole thing, the evaluation. We said, really need to go into this setting, but we couldn't do it until all of the legal stuff was handled. So that child had to stay in an unfortunate situation until everything got resolved. So you really got to kind of weigh that. But I have used it. I don't like to use it because I'm not a threatening person. But it's mostly been for changing the day in the amount of time. And that's usually gotten us to where we can come to a better agreement. You know, it's like, fine, you want to do that, I'm going to exercise my stay put rights, and they're going to stay in your class all day.
I was just laughing because I am a threatening person.
Yeah,
So
that's okay.
I would be like, oh no.
Yeah, and that's fine. But me, I have to be kind of this facilitator and try to
So are
not
you,
be.
I'm sorry, but
Yes,
are
sorry.
you an educational advocate? Do you
Yeah.
go into IEP
Yes.
meetings with families?
Sorry, I should have introduced myself.
just
It was
trying
all
to-
on there. The Center for Exceptional Families, we like parent mentors just because advocate can sometimes sound adversarial. So I try to say mentor because but I don't want you to think that we're coming in, we're not a threat. We're not coming in and being there to threaten schools to do anything. My goal is to work myself out of a job. My goal is to get you and your school to work together so that a lot of times it's a communication breakdown. It's you guys think you're communicating one thing, they think they're communicating another thing. I come in there and go, oh, you guys have no idea what the other side is talking about. But we're there, and yes, we do. Our goal is education. We do a lot of workshops in support. We talk to parents on the phone. But yes, I probably attend more IEP meetings just because I'm an ex-special ed teacher and that's my area. And I think I can do more if I'm actually there.
So we can hire, like,
We're free.
Okay, well, we can.
You can request.
You can request,
You
and
can
then
request.
like, will you just come to one meeting, or will you stay with us through the
It depends.
case?
It depends, because again, if you can advocate successfully for yourself, that's the goal. But sometimes I'm realistic. I know that having another person in the room makes a huge difference. Sometimes, backup. But again, we've got I cover 12 counties. I don't know how many K-8. You've got 8.
I saw that y'all are in Jonesboro, but there's someone in Little Rock. this
There's somebody in
area that-
everywhere. Yeah,
Okay.
in everywhere.
Awesome.
So the goal again would be I met Deanna at PAC, and we sat down and looked through her paperwork, and I talked to her and gave her stuff, asked for this and do this, and we talked through everything. And I didn't attend her meeting, but that is an option that we do have. So I didn't take the time to introduce because we've got all this 5,000 other things to talk about, but I apologize for that. Transfer students, this is another reason why you're having everything in writing is huge. I cannot tell you the number of kids that are struggling because they came from a really great or even a really poor setting, but a lot of what was being done for them was not in writing. Okay, so then they come to another district. The way, I'm not supposed to say legally because I'm not legal, so I say technically, but the way that's supposed to work is receiving schools have to provide comparable services. Okay, because I can't expect Elaine, where she lives, to be able to provide the exact same supports that Bentonville can. Okay, but it has to be comparable. So they have to be able to do the best they can for that child in the situation they are as to what's written on the IEP. Everything comes down to what's written on the IEP.
So like if I say my daughter needs a para with
Mhm.
her, and they say, nope, sorry, they can't do that.
They have to base it on data. Everything is data decision making, because the number one thing that people ask for is a one-on-one para. And so I knew that was gonna come up. No, you're fine. The goal for all of our kiddos, like you're saying, there is functional independence. We want them to be independent. And you'll hear this is the most restrictive, this is the most support. A lot of times it's not necessarily a para that the child needs. It's especially if it's autism, have we provided them visuals? Are they getting supports? Have you done any of these other things before you have somebody following them around all the time? Now, some of our kids do need that, but a lot of them don't. But it needs to be data-based decision making, which means if they're going to deny a para, there needs to be a reason, and put it in writing.
Because I just see like she gets fearful of things pretty frequently. It's not consistent. Like sometimes she's scared to go potty, especially if the potty's strange. Scared to redress herself. Scared to eat her food. I mean, there's just a lot of.
Yeah. So it would be like, do we have, have we done the social stories for that? Are we talking through? Do we have room for sensory breaks in the day? Do we have the visuals that say this is how we go? I always say most of the toileting is because you're asking kiddos to go to the bathroom. Said you never ask. You always say it's your turn.
Go sit on. Yeah.
It's your time. It's your turn. It's your time. It's on your schedule. Learning different supports that they can do. We have kiddos. I love the pause button or the pause cloth. It was my favorite thing I ever had because I potty trained forever. Was you just laid it over their stuff and said, "Okay, put this on pause. And you go to the bathroom. You come back. We'll unpause it. Now you can play with it. If it's covered up, the rest of your kids know not to touch it. But that was a big thing that we did because I had a kiddo. He was completely toilet trained, but he would get so into what he was doing he couldn't separate. And if you asked him, "Do you need to go to the bathroom?" "No, I don't. I need to finish this. I need to finish this." So I say, never negotiate with terrorists. Negotiate with terrorists. You just. I taught special ed preschool for 2 years. It's just what we do. It's our schedule. So a lot of times it's modifying that language. It's getting that support. So again, if she's got some food issues, do we know that? What are we doing to support her? Does she have choices? Because you can do a lot of things. You don't need a one-on-one person to do.
So
That's-
Go ahead.
Because she's like has texture aversions. Like she does not do crunchy.
Oh, I had a kiddo. He vomited when he just saw food on the TV, and I couldn't do art. I couldn't do anything. We had a drop cloth. He was super.
And if I'd let her, the girl would eat taquitos all the time.
Yeah.
Like, no, sorry, we can't live off taquitos. So
Can't live off
you have
taquitos.
these other stuff.
I feel like a one-to-one can be least restrictive depending on the kid and their needs, but it sometimes I think might be the most supportive.
And it depends on the para too, because do they have the training? Do they have support? Because paras aren't teachers.
Oh, I know.
They have to follow
Sometimes
what
they just sit there and they
Yeah.
don't really do anything. And
they
it's
don't know.
frustrating.
So
But-
that's why policy and procedures is huge.
I don't know. I don't think my son will actually need a one-to-one, but he's going to need something other than just full-blown 20 kids in a regular gen ed, because he's coming from here where there's very small class sizes, 4 people in each room, a whole lot of structure. Even though it doesn't have one-to-one, such a small setting.
Such a small
And
setting.
Kindergarten, the max is 20.
Right.
And he'll be one teacher in there. So I'm like, I don't necessarily need someone to follow him around all day, but he's just going to get so lost in 1 and
He's
20.
going to get so lost. And it's setting up those supports ahead of
What
time.
can I ask for in an IEP that could facilitate not necessarily needing one-to-one, but needing more, like a smaller? I wish I could just request a smaller class size without being in a self-contained, but that
Yeah.
doesn't really exist
Yeah.
either. What I want doesn't exist.
Yeah. Just
Well,
like someone who floats around.
Again,
like,
when we
Yeah.
get, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself and see what I can skip, and then I'll get. Let me get there, and then
Okay.
I'll talk about where we need to write some of this stuff and where we need to do it if I have the time to get to forms. Discipline for kiddos with disabilities is huge. I could spend all day talking about it. I'm just going to hit on it real quickly, and just say basically, schools have up to 10 days consecutive, or most people go by cumulative, or until a pattern emerges. You can suspend a kid for any reason. Doesn't matter if it has to do with their disability or not. Once they get, it just can't. They have a certain amount of things, and some will be very frugal with those days, and they will try to say, you need to come pick your child up early. They will do all of these other things that aren't official suspensions because they don't want to get to their 10 days.
Homeschooling is something better every day.
Yeah. And so, but the key is I will tell parents, I'm like, tell them if they're so bad that they have to go home, then suspend them. And parents don't want to do that. And I've had schools turn around and say, fine, we're going to file a fines on you for neglect. Fine. I said, if you can't handle them, make it official, because without it documented, without it in writing, then you can't get what's supposed to happen, which once you get to that point, they have to have a meeting. There has to be what's called a manifestation determination. They have to sit there and say, is this behavior a result of their disability? Do we need to make changes? Sometimes that's the only way you can get a functional behavior assessment, is they'll say, oh, we haven't gotten to our 10 days yet. They're not so bad. Or Katie, what did they say? The teacher was going on and on and on and on and on.
Out of the blue.
It was out of the blue after she had said, he's hit me this many times and he's done this and he's done this and he's done this.
Blocked it 15 times, but it came out of the blue.
But then all of a sudden it came out of the blue. And they didn't change behavior plan. That makes no sense to me. So again, it's all about getting it in writing and forcing that to happen, because the schools can then say, well, the parent just can't pick them up. But parents, you feel like you do. Your kiddo's suffering. They're at school, that they're crying and they're miserable, so you want to come pick them up. But a lot of times then you end up with learned behaviors and they're being rewarded for that behavior. So, and 504 is the same. On the back of here, I put some forms for you on here, because that's really kind of the most important thing that you guys want to know, is the forms. So when you're looking at an IEP form, these are the places that you guys really need to pay attention. The first part is this is where your parents' rights are, and it's just how they provided to you. Your method of participation. A lot of people will try to do phone conferences now, which I personally don't like, just because it's hard for you to pay attention, and a lot of times you don't have that. So I would say if they want you to do a phone conference where that's all you can do, ask for them to send you the paperwork ahead of time. It's in draft, but you should be able to have that to look at if they're going to do it on the phone. They laughed at me in Hot Springs because I was helping with a phone conference, and I was literally in the corner like that, trying to focus so that I could understand and follow along with everything that was going on. But some parents, they just don't have transportation, or they just can't get there, and or work or whatever. And I did include on here a resource on your resource page. Apparently, this came out that you can use your Family Leave Act for IEP meetings. Really? Mm-hmm. Because it's considered a medical thing. It even included.
Not paid, but you can use it.
Yeah, but you can use it just like you wouldn't get. But it can't like keep you from getting fired. But there's a place to go look all of that up. So I want to make sure that you had it. This is huge. The parent guardian input. Okay. Most of what I see is parents talk, and then the school paraphrases in very politically correct language what their concerns are. Or they just said, parent was here. I'll admit it, when I was there, I used to say, parent attended and participated in the development of the IEP, and that's all I wrote. Okay? Now that I'm on the other side, it's very important. This is your words. This is your stuff. Okay? You can bring something and have it attached. You can bring something, but like, again, where Katie is struggling, her mom talked, had tons of concerns. None of them are written down. Okay? So who's going to have any documentation of that meeting? Nowhere. Your parent concerns are your parent concerns, and they don't have to be all negative. They can be positive. I like this. I don't like this. This is what I'm concerned about. But your parent concerns are your parent concerns. Okay? It does not have to be their PC'd version. Because, I mean, if any of us were writing about ourselves and somebody was coming in and telling us, we're not going to want to write. We're going to want to write it as nice as we can, even if it is negative. But that might not be the same wording. I have a mom. I can't emphasize enough to get a copy of the IEP and a copy of everything. They'll say, well, we're going to type this up and give it to you later. Say, well, go ahead and give me what you have now. I understand that's a draft. Because I have had at least one. She had specific wording that she wanted. It was not what was on there, the printed copy. And I couldn't help her with it because she had no draft copy. She just had what she remembered. There wasn't a whole lot I could do because there was nothing in writing. But that's a huge place. The big emphasis right now throughout the state is your PLAF. And I included this awesome thing called a PLAF report card. This is your present level. I'm not going to be done. 5 minutes. Oh. Okay. Present level academic functional performance. Most of the time you get a list of test scores, or you'll get the child's, my biggest baby, they're reading at a 4, and we want them to read at a 7. What does that tell you? If I said your child's reading at a 4?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Is it 4 years old? Is it 4th
Is it 4
grade?
years old? They can do 3rd grade math. Great. You know how much is covered in 3rd grade math? A lot. What does that tell me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So another thing that I do is I help parents. Well, what does a 4 look like? When I put in the helpful questions, I'm big on what does that look like? How do you know that? Where's the data? Because again, you're not accusing, like if you think somebody is not following a modification, they're not shortening assignments, so I'll just say, well, what does that look like? What does shortened assignments look like in your classroom? And sometimes the regular teacher, if they're doing it, they can tell me. If they're not doing it, they can't tell me. And so I'm like, well, maybe we need to look at that. Maybe we need, again, I'm not a confrontational person, so I'm passive aggressive though, so but on here, it's awesome. It needs to have strengths, academic needs, developmental needs, functional needs. We all have kiddos I had kiddos who were word callers. He could read everything. He could not do anything functionally with it. He had no comprehension. He didn't know what it was. So it didn't help that he had a word recall score way up here. Or a kiddo that could count to 100 but couldn't give me 3 things. Okay? Giving me the 3 things. Doing that's the functionality of that. And again, sometimes that's hard for parents. We're like, well, they know all their numbers and they can recognize all of this, but what can they do with it? Can you make a word? Can you do anything with it? Effect of the disability on the general education curriculum. That's required. How is this affecting their ability to function in the general ed? Achievement of their annual goals. Sometimes once you've got an annual, that's all you get, is the achievement of their goals. Performances related services. Everybody, your PT, OT speech, they all need to be writing on this part. The rest of this is secondary. So I don't think we have any secondary people in here, but it's transition related and effect on this, on what are they going to be doing when they get out of school. All of that is supposed to be on that flap. And I have seen more than one. This is their grade level, this was their score, they got this on that, and that's all they say. Somebody should be able to pick up this IEP, your IEP, and write the IEP from what's on here, okay? And if it's addressed on here as a concern, it needs to be addressed later in the IEP as a goal or a modification or a support, okay? Because again, we've had them saying, oh, the kiddo can't do this and he struggles to go to the bathroom, but there are no supports in there to help him achieve that. So if it's written, it needs to be supported. Your special factors, big things to know. Communication mode, if we have kiddos in here who are nonverbal or they need to have visuals. It used to be communication was only for like the ESL, the English language learner kids and all of those. It says communication mode. So if your child has a device or if they need to have visuals, I get that a lot to help my kids with behavior, because what happens is when somebody comes up and talks them through something or they say something but they never showed them a picture and they have autism and that's the way that they think, get it written down. They have to have it. It can go there or it can go in other factors. If they need sensory supports, get that in writing on this special factor. And it doesn't have to be specific because we all know that changes. You know, maybe bouncing on a ball is great today. Tomorrow it needs to be a trampoline, okay? But you can say sensory supports, visuals. The same thing with behavior. People don't want to write on here because we were told a long time ago, don't write anything on behavior if you don't have a behavior plan. But how many of our kids have behavior issues? A lot of them. So if they need, what they call tangibles, okay? Like I had my will work for food kids. If you're doing anything, if they need a first then, if they need things broken up into smaller things, if it's going to affect their behavior, write it on here. It needs to be written on here. And you'll find that you'll wonder why they're writing food on there, and we joke that that's all because of Michelle Obama, who changed all the nutritional stuff. And we can't, so you can only have a certain number of non-nutritional days at school. They can only have a certain number of parties. So if they're going to use food as a reinforcer for your kiddo, they need to write it on here. But that's why they will. And parents are like, why do you have to write that down? Who cares? That's why.
Because she doesn't have any special needs children.
Yeah. And they only eat chicken nuggets and fries. I had a kiddo, he just wanted chicken nuggets every day, chicken nuggets, and everything else was no thank you, no thank you. If we didn't have chicken nuggets,
He's going to starve today.
he had a meltdown every day. But his mom was very much, he gets what he served, and he can eat when he gets home. And I'm like, so we had no choice on that one. But sometimes they do have to get to that point, I don't know, it's not my decision, I'm not their parent. Least restrictive environment, this was where I had told you earlier, where it says the child's needs cannot be achieved in the general curriculum environment even when supplemental aids and supports are provided. So a lot of times our kiddos are getting pushed out of the general classroom when they have not done supplemental aids and supports. They have not provided visuals. They have not altered their work. They have not given them breaks. They have not done anything. I will say that a lot of times our kiddos with autism do better starting off in a self-contained or smaller classroom environment because they need so much explicit instruction on how to do school and how to do behaviors, and it's just not possible really for a lot of them to have that achieved. I have a kid right now we were working on, and they tried. They were really trying, not as long as I would have liked them to try, but her academics were fine. But she didn't know how to sit, how to wait, how to go to the bathroom, how to do all of that, how to ask for help, all those kinds of stuff.
Kindergarten is so intense now.
And kindergarten
They
is
have a
so
lot of
intense.
expectations.
And so sometimes the whole goal of that is to say IEPs are fluid. They can be changed at any time. I'll say legally have to be evaluated once a year, but you can ask for a meeting anytime.
And you don't have to sign an IP that you don't agree with. A lot of parents don't understand that. I think
Well-
they just kind of sign whatever's put in front of them, and I'm like, don't sign that. But
Well, actually, when you sign your IEP, you are signing attendance. You are not assigning any. Used to be that you were signing, I agree, I don't agree. Now you're signing that you were there and you were part of the committee. On the notice of action,
okay.
that is the last form. That is, I would say, your most important thing right now. Consider that the notes of your meeting, okay? That's what happened, where it happened. I guarantee you, if they want something, like if the parent said they're gonna take their child to the doctor, they're gonna write that on there. If the parent said they're gonna do something, anything they wanna make sure is documented, they're gonna have on there. So we need to make sure. I asked for a paraprofessional and they told me that it wasn't necessary, but that, write it on here. I asked for an evaluation, they said it wasn't necessary. The teacher said she was gonna create this for me. Great, talk about how long that might take and get a reasonable amount of expectations and say, okay, how long do you think that's gonna take you? 2 weeks? Okay, so in 2 weeks, we'll have that. And we've talked about it and we've written it. Because this is just as legally binding as your IEP, that notice of action, those are your notes. Your notes. So what you do on that is you have a place up at the top where it says you consent to immediate implication. Don't sign that. Okay, that's where I say don't sign. Because that gives you 7 days before it automatically goes into effect. Because everything's a committee decision. Okay? It's not all about what the parent wants, and it's not supposed to be what the administration wants. It's supposed to be a committee decision, but we all know that they've gotten 7 of them and 2 of us, and most of the time the school's gonna win.
And where is that? I'm sorry.
It's sorry.
We'll get it all.
It's on the notice of action, and up here in the box, you right here on the very top of the page, you've got consent required and consent not required. But then there's a place that says right here. All right. Yeah. Place for action that can go into place immediately.
Oh.
Sometimes they'll do that because they want it to go ahead and start, or they want it, everything we did here to be final. If not, don't sign it. Then you have up to 7 days to come back and say, hey, I've thought about this, I want this to be changed, and things can be changed. It doesn't mean your kiddo's not going to get services. They might say that, but most of the time it just means, hey, I want to take this home and look at it. But it's not the signing of the IEP because it literally says just attendance. You're there. So a notice of action is where you say, I don't want this to take place immediately, I want to think about it and go back, and sometimes you're not going to need that.
That's specifically this line right here.